Well, thanks everyone for showing up. I'd like to thank our sponsors, CRI, for the drinks and pizza and location. We're gonna do a random. Oh yeah.
Woo! CRI.
There you go. So of course we're gonna do a random number generator for 3 JetBrains IDs.
Yeah, sure.
All right. So we got 1, 2, 3.
2. Wait, no. We do hand raising because not everybody wants it. So
okay.
essentially what it is one free license for a year to any JetBrains individual product, which JetBrains is like IDE. So in iOS it's AppCode, then there's RubyMine, there's
PyCharm.
So many things.
There's
so many
one
things.
for everyone.
So if you're interested, we have a lot to give away. So they just keep giving me codes. So just raise your hands if you're interested, and then raise your hand. You got one?
I like a chance. You can't get all 3, man. It's not how it works.
I just need to start giving it away online.
Yeah.
Okay. You got a code.
Yeah.
You got a code. You got a code. Yeah, just message me on Meetup. Perfect. Done.
I got 10. So you guys 10. All right. Is that all? Anything else? So mainly for tonight, I'll just be giving a talk on SwiftUIKit. It's a library that I was working on to make UIKit easier to work with, a little bit closer to SwiftUI, a little bit more declarative. But other than that, it was more open forum. If anyone wanted to demo anything, ask anything, we could kind of talk. It's a pretty light night. Try to look for more talks from other people, or if you have any topics, let me know in the Slack or just comment on the Meetup. Anything else you got?
We could do introductions.
Yeah,
Do you not like introductions?
I forget. It's been a while, man. It's been like a month.
Okay.
I'm
You said
Zach.
that we need to do it.
I'm Zach.
No. I mean like
Yeah, but
you're
we'll just-
speaker. You're speaker, so you don't.
I go last.
You. Then you.
I just want to get over.
You can do it now. Whatever you want to do.
I'm Zach. I work at FNO. Or from now on, I'm the iOS developer there. I think it's pretty basic.
Android. Stupid. I'm David Corrado, organizer of this meetup. I'm also organizer of the Android meetup, the GGG meetup. And I do Android at FanDuel. And feel free in this introduction to mention anything else you want to talk about. You're looking for a job, any other meetups that you like, anything you learned. Now's the time.
Hey, I'm Matthew, and I work on the iPhone apps at USA Today.
Roger, just getting into this business and been here for 6 months or so. Enjoy it, love learning it, so that's my story.
Cool.
I'm Jody, and I teach at Metro.
I'm Tom Schumacher. Usually spend my time IT recruiting. Most of my time has been playing foosball lately.
I'm Parsha. I do Android here at CRI.
Awesome. Well, first off, I'll be giving a talk on SwiftUIKit. Like I said, it's a framework that I've been working on to make it just easier to work with UIKit for iOS 9 backwards compatible. I'd like to give a little shout out to OneLeaf. OneLeaf's a nonprofit organization based on learning from any stage that you're at. We really accept 3 different types of people, but we accept everyone. We accept people that are switching jobs from a non-technical job to trying to switch to a technical job, high schoolers, college students. We also accept people trying to get experience that can't get an internship, so we will act as their internship for professional experience. And then we also accept a lot of professional developers, designers, other people in the tech field that will come mentor people or bring in the projects. It's a fully open source based community, and we use Discord to communicate. We have over 300 members in Discord, and we really just come with the focus of we all want to learn together, we all want to grow. We have daily coders and tons of other topics to look at. So if you're interested, just check it out or bug me. Here's also our GitHub page. We have tons of active projects. You can see our most starred project is actually a Vapor API that I helped write. It is for our website, and our website is backend API written in Vapor. You can see that we have a React front end, then we'll have an iOS app and an Android app. So we try to hit all the stacks, and we try to give the people working on it the glory of actually doing it, so they can use that for a resume or anything like that you've actually worked with a nonprofit. So that's just a little plug of OneLeaf. If you're interested, feel free to talk to me. Other than that, I'm going to dive into our intro to SwiftUIKit. SwiftUIKit is really just a clever name on SwiftUI and UIKit. It's kind of a merge of both. Now, that doesn't mean that it has all the benefits of SwiftUI with the data binding and all of that, but it just is UIKit in the kind of stylized SwiftUI. So to write any UI code in UIKit is just very verbose. If you don't know what it is, it's imperative. And to write a button that is actually properly written with auto layout constraints and everything like that, you have to write, I can't even fit it all. Oh, I guess, no, I can't. So this is all the code to set up the button. The very top line is just initializing the button. The second line is the most important line if you're doing any UI code. It's called TAMIC, or translates auto sizing mask into constraints. You always just want that false. That's just a default thing. If you're doing any constraints in Swift, you just want that off, because otherwise the system will make its own constraints and then you're just battling with constraints. After that, I'm just setting the title to add, changing the color, and then adding a function to it. So this function right here says use this selector or use this function button tapped for any time it's a touch up inside. So that's just touch up inside the button. So I touch the button. That's pretty much all it means. After that, I add the button to the view, and this is just the view controller's root view. So it's just one view inside of a view. And after that, I add some constraints. Now, constraints are really popular now. I think in an iOS 10 or 11, they were more introduced, and now they've kind of taken over the whole iOS world. And if you don't use them, I guess you're doing it wrong. And that's because if you rotate the device, it will automatically do the constraints and stay away. So if I have a padding of 8, I don't have to calculate the frame, the height and width. I don't have to know the X and Y based off of this phone size. All I have to say is this button's leading anchor, which is the left side of the view, is equal to its parent leading anchor, and all it has is a padding of 8. So then pretty much what we'll see is, pretty much you kind of see something like that. This is a view embedded in another view with a padding of around 8. So you can see the green view is embedded in the root view of the blue, and that's the padding. So that's basically the idea of what I mean by embed a view. So my solution to not write all of this all the time is to simply make a framework so I can just write this. That does the exact same thing in just about 3 lines of code. I say that I have a view, and I embed another view with some padding, and that view happens to be a button, and then the title is add, title color, and for the event. And then inside of this closure, I can say exactly what I want to happen, just like the other ones. So that kind of reduces the line. That's the overall kind of idea of how much boilerplate we write in UIKit. And it makes sense looking at this, why we would use storyboards so much. You can drag and drop, you can just say like, oh, I want it 8 pixels away. You can visually see it change right in front of your eyes. But if you don't want to use storyboards, and in this article I explicitly say I like to work in code more with UI, it's just UI code gets messy after a while. It's a lot more code to write than logic, and there's a difference between. So for this, I want to write more like that. I want to write easy, quick stuff. It's more static. It's not meant to be like SwiftUI, where I can bind variables and everything will change magically. It's UIKit, but just nicer to work with. So we're going to dive in and see a quick introduction. So like I said, embedding a view is really simple. All you have to do is write that code right there. I hope everyone can see it. View.embed, and then I can put views inside of views, pretty easy. Now that embed does all the auto layout for me and automatically binds everything to whatever padding I want. So if I do rotate the device, everything's going to change to what I expect. And I have an example later on showing the difference between auto layout and just setting the frame, saying I want you at 60, 60, and then your height is 70 and something. Now that doesn't change based on the device or based on the rotation. Auto layout will. So if you're working with pretty much anything now, stack views are very popular in making UI easier to create. And that's just simply because they automatically manage the constraints of the view inside of it. So all I have to worry about is I have one stack view, and this one happens to be a vertical stack view. And you can tell it's vertical stack because it stacks these three views that I put inside of it vertically, and they're all equal. Now, the distribution of the stack view is deterministic of what I say it is. And in this case, I say the stack view is equally. So this stack view will fill every view equally compared to each other. So if one is 60 pixels high, the rest will be 60 pixels high based off of that. So again, you can just see I embed a view inside of a view with some padding, and then I have this V stack, which is a vertical stack. I can put as many views as I want in there, and it will automatically manage those based off of the size of the vertical stack. So in this case, it will look exactly like this because they're filled equally. The vertical stack is embedded in a view, so it's not bigger than the view. It is the view size or smaller of its parent. So you can see right here, I have 3 views that have a background color of system green, but I haven't told those views what to do at all. They are respecting what the VStack is. So that's just, again, anything I say is back to UIKit. So this is all just old stuff I'm talking about, just in a different kind of way. So for complex views, pretty much all you need is embedding a view inside of a view, or a horizontal view, or a horizontal stack, or a vertical stack. So what I just showed you, but also sideways. So this, if we look at it, if we break it down, you can see that there is a view, and then there's a V stack, or a vertical stack, containing this area and this area. And then it looks like a horizontal stack with another vertical stack. So if you think of views as that, you can really break them down into easy components to digest. So if we look at the code, hopefully the code speaks more about this. Hopefully the code speaks a little more than doing it imperatively in UIKit. If I did it imperatively, it would be like that first example where I showed a button. Sorry for the scroll. But if I have to manage all those constraints of any view that's not a horizontal stack or a vertical stack, if I have to worry about how far is this top view versus this view, well, I mean, that's just stuff I don't want to worry about, because first off, I mean, you have to worry about TAMIC, and you'll hear that word or the acronym a lot when you're working with UI code, because if you forget to turn this off, it's not going to do what you want, and it's just really annoying that you have to add that for every single line. So when we're trying to make a view like this, it's simply as I say, because it's stupid code, but it makes it a little bit longer or indented, so it goes a lot more in. But you can understand that a view has a V stack that then has a horizontal stack and a view. So that's where the half and half happens. And so then really the only complex view is this top horizontal stack, where it has a view and then a vertical stack. So it's just kind of working with there. So once you start getting used to that, it's really, really quick to make views. And this is kind of the same thing of SwiftUI, is that you're still gonna kind of think this component mechanic of, hey, I have a V stack or an H stack, or I have a view that can embed a view. Other than that, you're really kind of moving views around. So if I have a floating action button on the bottom right, that's some different things that you have to do. But a lot of people will think like, oh, I could actually do an H stack and V stack and some spacers. And I'll dive into that a little bit later, but that's more of an edge case of where do I put views inside of it. But for this declarative syntax, it's more of the parent determines what happens to the child views instead of imperatively. So really quick, let's just go in and see how quick it is to import or use my library. And it's just a Swift package manager library or package. And it makes it super easy. So all you need is Xcode 11. You open up Xcode 11, make a new project. Just make sure it's a storyboard project. It's kind of hard to see, but yeah, just make sure it's a storyboard project, and you can make it a single view. You can make it anything you want. I advise single view because single view is the most basic. After that, you just need to go to File, go to Swift Packages, and this is how you add any Swift package to Xcode 11. You can add package dependency right there, and then you just search for any package. You can find mine right there. If you can't find it, it's probably because you haven't logged into your GitHub account into Xcode, or you can put in the full URL of the repo that you're trying to import. So you can really do this with almost anything that is a Swift package. So after you've picked what you want, you can select the version, and you can select the version range. So I want this version to be version 1.0 to version 2. Or you can pick a branch, or even just a commit. So it's pretty verbose on what you want to work with. And then after that, you just say, hey, I want to target it to my demo app or whatever target you want. And boom, it's added. So after that, you just have to import it, and then you can start embedding views inside of views. So really quick, I'll just go through and talk about what I added into SwiftUI and what I'm happy with for version 1. I really want it as a lightweight, kind of static UI building framework. Like I said, it's not a framework that binds to variables and updates everything. It's pretty dumb in the sense that I can just create views and then change the variables if I save a reference to that view. So in SwiftUIKit, it has a navigate singleton, which allows me to call navigate.shared, and then I can just go to other view controllers, other things like that, just out of a whim. I don't have to set up a segue or anything like that. I can present alerts, action sheets, toast menus, and then, yeah, I have a horizontal stack, vertical stack, Z stack, and this all is just the same as SwiftUI. So it's nothing new, it's nothing crazy. And then the rest of it is just easy to add, like button. I don't want to create a UI button and that stuff, so I add some nice, quick things to change. So for my example, I have this GitHub project. So I'll show you really quick, just kind of the visual of it. I guess I could just run it, but more of I want to look at the code after. So for this pretty much has all the basic UI components that you can quickly create and examples of each. So the first one, the say hello, is just a button that you can click on. And FYI, this whole thing is contained in a table or a static table. It's more used for, it's not like a dynamic table that you can add stuff in. But if you want views to look like a table that you add in, just like SwiftUI, you can throw views in here. So we have label, dividers, text fields, buttons, images. You can see image right there, loading views, so you can have them animate, show a loading view, and then switch it when it's done. There's quite a bit of other things that I'll dive into, and even a web view and stuff like that. So going into it, you can kind of see my example right here. Yep, okay, cool. So the first way I have up is the imperative way. So this is how you normally write UIKit, and this is why it's not fun to write, or at least I don't think it's fun to write. After some point, you get used to it. So I have a button. I create a reference to this button. After that, I change some things to it. I tell it what the title is, I tell it what the text color is, and I tell it the target. So that's all of these. Now I have this. If I forget this, it will only affect if I have constraints. So I'll show that in a bit. But right now, there's two ways to place this button. There's a static way where I tell it right now, you go right here at what I'm saying is 60, 60, and then you're 60 wide, 60 tall. So if I run that right now, we can kind of see the example of that. It's going to be at the top left, and I click it, it says hello world, and I rotate it. It stays at that relative position where it first started. Now if I was on an iPad, it would be way, it would be at 60, 60, but it's not respectively as well as a constraint. And I'll illustrate that better after I get rid of this and actually show you constraint. So there's a little bit more code for it, but if I wanted the padding all the way around, then I could just write this. And this is the code that you have to write every single time, I'm sorry. So I have an NS layout constraint, or a layout constraint, and I want to activate all of these ones that I'm putting inside of it. So a button's leading anchor is this left-hand side, and I want that to equal its parent's view, leading anchor, but I'm going to give it some padding. So if I run this right now, well, it's really not going to do what I want. And you see some right here. So this is what I was talking about before, is you cannot forget the TAMIC, because if you forget the TAMIC, the system constraints are going to take over and ignore all of yours. So once I put in this one line, I will get constraints. And so now this view is embedded inside of this view with 8 padding, or 8 pixels of padding. So pretty much if I click anywhere except for right at the edge, it's going to click the button. So you can see Hello World popping up. And that is a lot easier than calculating, I want 8x, 8y, and then what's the screen size, minus 16, because you have to calculate for both sides. So instead of doing this frame, you can kind of just tell the view, all right, here's the things around you, respect that, and always stay like that. Now, yes.
Can you show the view debugger?
Yes, thank you. I was about to check it out. All right, so we're going to check the view debugger to look at this. So you can see that we have this button right here. We have a nice button add, and if I rotate this a little to the side, you can kind of see the root view right behind it. And so if I go zoom in a little, yeah, we can see that 8 padding. We can click on this right window right here, and we can go to the ruler, and the ruler will actually tell us our constraints. So you can see that we have, that's a little tough to read, so we have the button's trailing anchor, which is the anchor on the right-hand side, leading, trailing. The trailing anchor is equal to its super view's trailing anchor minus 8. So that's how we get this little tiny sliver of padding. So that's basically how you have to write all those, unless it's stack view. And the stack views manage the child in itself, so you'd still have to write this code for the stack view to make sure it is relative to its parent. So if we go to a little example of SwiftUIKit, I have some code in here already, and we're already looking at the navigate. I won't show us that right now. So the navigate singleton is pretty nice, but we'll talk about it later. So we have this basic view controller. This is just really, really basic. There's no other view controller in here. I only have a base view controller or just one view controller. There's nothing else. The only thing that I have that I actually add in here is in the main storyboard, I add a navigation controller to the view controller. So that's the only thing that I've actually added in here other than the code that I'm about to show you. So we have some variables at the top. We have some view controller that we can use and we can refer to. We have a field, a multi-line field, and then we have this view embed. So let me run this really quick so we have a better understanding, even though I showed you on the GitHub the example of it. So we have this table, and it has a ton of views inside of it that we can check out. And you can scroll and see there's a scroll view and other things like that. So we'll dive into it really quick, and if you have any questions, I can show you either example. So I've already showed you the button. That's super easy, but sorry, I skipped over something. So we have a view. There's in any view controller, there's a root view, and so we're just telling that root view, which always has to be there, that it needs to embed some view. Safe area views respect the safe area around it. So all this other stuff you can see on the side or anything like that. There's all this notch area or spacing around, like right here, that if you didn't use safe area constraints, you just ignore that. If we had, I had an example in the first one. Oops, sorry. Yeah, so if I add this button, and really quick, if I do this is an example of if you ignore any safe area, you'll actually lose interactivity with your view. So for this first example, well, geez, I can't tap that add because I said it's at 0, 0, but I'm referring to 0, 0 like right here. But for the actual frame, it ignores everything, and well, now I can't tap it. So that's just really quickly what a safe area is. So the safe area view makes sure everything is inside the safe area of any device, iPad, iPhone 8, which is not really, like the iPhone 8s don't have that much safe area. It's really the 10 series that have the safe area with the rounded corners and the status bar and the notch. So then inside the safe area, we have a table, which just has default height. I can set other things in here. So if I quickly just show you, table has all these other things. I can set default height, estimated height, and the closure for what views do I want to put in this. So this table doesn't use cells, and that's kind of why I made it, static. It's not meant to be this dynamic table that you scroll through like Twitter that takes in a lot of data, because it doesn't even use cells or reuse cells. It just draws views onto them. So I'm not saying that's a good method. Please don't do that. Just understand that it's mainly for static to get the view. So yeah, we have a simple button, and if I tap on the button, it says hello. So that's probably one of the dumber examples that I could get, other than just a view that shows up. After that, we have H-stack with a little divider on it. So the dividers are really quick views that you can make horizontal and vertical to quickly just separate views. Pretty dumb. You could do it with your own view. You could use a view with its own constraints and make it, it's just kind of placeholder for quick access. After that, we have a spacer, and spacers are really used in SwiftUI to automatically manage the space between. So if I had a table and I had a title on the left, and I wanted, the number count or something on the right, and there's space in between, but it depends on how much actual text is in the title or the amount, then I can just put a spacer, and that will automatically add or automatically change. So what I'm saying right here is I have amount left, I have 4, and in between right here is the spacer. So again, if I go, I'm trying to go in the view debugger to actually show you the spacer, but if I typed in a lot more numbers, you'd see the spacer actually, well, you shouldn't see the spacer shrink, but the spacer is right in between here, and it's actually shrunk automatically. I don't worry about it, and all the views kind of grow until they interact with each other. Otherwise, the spacer will just turn into 0 or grow infinitely. So that's just basic like that. Now, fields are really easy to work with. I have the example up here of, I have a field. It has a default value, or the first value is current value, and it has a placeholder of enter a value. So if I go here, we can see that. I can delete all this, and it says enter a value. I can type stuff in, and once I type stuff in, it actually tells me what it does. And you can see that I have modifiers on these. So the modifiers that I put on all of these views just allow me to quickly change anything, but still talk about this view. So at the end of this modifier, you can see that it returns self. So I pass it a closure, it will take that closure and handle it how it may. It might take a variable, handle it how it may, but then at the end it returns the same value. So I can chain these as much as I want and say, oh, after that I want to configure and I want to change something about this text field. It's still referring to the same value at the end, so I can technically do this. I don't know what to change things, so blah 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 stuff. But you can do that and it'll still return a field at the end because it's referring to the same one. Now those are just easy modifiers to allow me to do stuff. So if I had a text field or a label, and let's say this label took in some text, I can quickly tell it how many lines I want, what text color, what anything else, and I can chain those together and still keep it in the same context. So I'll show you that a little bit later. But specifically, there's an input handler where I just give it a closure that accepts a string, and I can do stuff on that. So otherwise, let's see if we can dive in here and see how long. Yeah. So this is all the code for UI text field, and pretty much you can just see it. It's a lot of boilerplate code. A lot of boilerplate code. Pretty much I've taken whatever text it has, placeholder, keyboard type. Is it just a number pad? Is it a decimal? Is it a phone number? Is it email? All that other stuff for the keyboard to actually have some context. And then after that, what do I do with the input? And that's this will input handler update and input handler. So I have two modifiers that I can pass in closures, and I'll just skim over that really quick. Pretty much the will input handler is, given this value, do I accept it? And if I say no, then the user can't type that in. So if I wanted to only make this field accept ints or like no characters, I can do will input handler accept, or will update, and then I can just say, oops, sorry, it takes in a value, so some value, and I want to just return int privilege, and does not equal. So, oops. Oh yeah. So this actually does take a little bit more. So inside of this, it'll pass you the text field. Let's see what it does, because this is a little bit more. So yeah, it'll pass you the text view, so you can refer to the actual object. It'll pass you the new value, and then it'll pass the character, the input being put into this, so the next number. So we can check this really quick. And so if I just do text view, text field, value, and then input, this will work. And pretty much, yeah. So then if I just change this to int, it should only accept integers now. So I'm typing everything on my keyboard until I type in numbers. And so it only accepts an integer now. So if I wanted currency, it's very similar to how you do it in UIKit. There's no really big difference on it, because in the end, it's still using the same kind of handlers down here. So there's delegates in UIKit, and really all these kind of UI views that I create for easy handling just refer back to the delegates. So you can always look in and just see what it's doing. So, back. Cool. So yeah, that's just a field. So I can make a reference to it, use it later, put it in any view that I want, and I have a reference back to it. So you don't have to always create a button whenever you want. And really quickly, yeah, that's modifier to say the frame is 60 pixels wide. So that'll add a constraint to it of a width of 60 pixels. So going into it a little bit more, we have images that you can quickly throw in a color. So normally you can't do this in UIKit. I mean, you can, because I'm doing it, but I can't type in UI image and then pass it a color. I can pass it anything like this, but there's no color. There's names, there's system names, there's image literal resources, data, and all that, but now I can quickly just pass it a color. And the nice part about this framework is that it's all using UIKit. So it's like, oh, how did I do that? So you can go quick and check out and just see that I have a init that accepts an image from a color. Okay, cool, cool. And pretty much that's what it does. I mean, ignore the exclamation marks. I don't think any time explicitly interrupts good, but this is more messing with old CG or UI graphics. So it's a little bit older and it's not really used that much. But for quick access of just adding a color for prototyping or anything like that, it's really handy. So after that, I had a lot of images that I loaded from URL. So what do I do next? Well, I added a loading image. Cool. So then I have a loading image. So now I can pretty much take any image from any URL. It'll animate the activity spinner, and then it will populate that image whenever I want. It acts the same as an image, but it uses this loading view, which is just that simple. Is a loading view. You can maybe pick the style. You don't have to pick the style, and you can just start the loading indicator. So it'll do the spin. So pretty much that's what a loading image does. It's just a UI image, but there's a lot of code in the back to do this asynchronously to handle the load of this image. And if you really want to know, of course, you can go in and kind of understand, okay, well, I guess it has a URL request, it uses a URL session data task, and then after it's gotten the data, then it'll turn it into data, it'll check if it can make it in an image, and if it can, it'll put it into that view for you. So it manages a lot of things behind the scenes for you. And again, I won't touch on multi-line field. That is just a UI text view. UI text field is very, very, very similar. So for buttons, I was touching a little bit on the navigate singleton. It's kind of good and bad practice in some senses. If you're doing dumb apps, I mean, I think it's fine, but once you have a very complex app, you should have some way to coordinate where you're going inside of this app laid out so you can't teleport anywhere. But I say teleport being, I have some view controller that I made in code, and when I click navigate to some view, well, I guess, and that's because I commented all this code out. So if you haven't configured the navigate singleton, and configure meaning you give it your navigation controller right here. So navigate, shared, configure, and I'm just saying, use this navigation controller to navigate you around. It's here, it's nice and handy. After I do that, then I can pretty much use all these navigate functions. So navigate to some view controller will just push me to another view controller. I have a label in there. It already does the navigation, so I can go back. That's easy. So that just makes it a little bit easier to quickly navigate, quickly present something, show a toast or an alert, action sheet, whatever you make. So, and that's just to this code. So you can do the same in a button. It pretty much just looks like this. So if I go here, I can give it an action, and then pretty much just navigate, share, and I just want to go to, let's just create a UI view controller just to further the point of I can create really anything and kind of just put stuff inside of stuff. So I'll just make a view with a background color of, I don't know, red, something not like red. Okay, cool. So then if I throw a label inside of this view, then I already have a view controller with a label. Oops. And then I can pick the navigation style, modal or push. So this time I'll pick modal. It's not going to let me because it's an array, so I need to just give it a comment. Something stupid. So if I click go here, boom. It's a modal, it's red background, there's text, it is, check that, that's a bug. But it should automatically manage the constraints, so that was weird. But going on, there's scroll views in here, super easy. If I need a view and this view is supposed to be scrolled, I'll tell it the constraints right here. So I have this view. This view is apparently 1,000 wide, so it goes past the phone's bounds. So at that point, if I didn't have this scroll view, it would look kind of dumb. And it would probably actually not even follow these constraints. It would probably get some, yeah, well, maybe it is, I don't know actually. But it's gonna take the whole view, and it's not going to actually be the 1,000 that I can view. So if I quickly add a scroll view, well, then I can just scroll that 1,000. So it's pretty simple. It just needs to know how big it is in the scroll view to actually scroll the whole thing. So that's easy enough. Sliders, very easy right there. If I want a slider quickly from one value to another, well, I just tell you that. And well, it's at 0.5, and every time I move it, it will tell me what it moved to. So that's just super quick. And most of these are just meant to make things that you have to do so much repetitive time. Like I'll just show you okay, I have to do all that every single time I want a slider that has the same functionality, basically what I have. So it's the give and take, and at some point I got tired of writing, so that's again why I did that. So another spacer example, if I have two images and I want spaced in between them, just really quickly, boom, there's space in between them, arbitrary. I can add the right image to be, 240 width, and that will automatically update for me, and the spacer is in between. So the next example, really quick, is just a toggle or a switch. Really easy. Tell it if it's on, what it does when it changes. I mean, that's all the switch really knows. Other than that, if I wanted to change the switch or the toggle's color, I have this really cool closure for configure to configure any NS object in Swift. So NS object is one of the most deep-reaching values in Swift, and I'll show you because this is one of my favorite Swift functions that I've written because I found it hard to write it in another language since it actually passes the reference of itself. And what I mean by that is I don't override NS object and I don't get past an NS object. I override NS object and I get past that object. So what that means is if I do configure on switch, when I refer to this object in here, it is actually a switch. So I can do tint color, and it actually refers to what the object is. And hopefully I changed the I forget how to change color. But I can show you really quickly after this last one, a web view. Web views are annoying to work with, especially since, well, not especially, but everyone ignored switching away from UI web view until it was a little too late. So now WebKit web view is the norm. There's still UIKit or UI web view. There's the difference. But you're not supposed to use UI web view. Don't use it. It's bad. Use WebKit web view. There's a difference. Think memory is. Other than that, just kind of basic stuff of loading files, loading an image, loading a URL. The nice part about this web view, and I think I over-engineered at this point, is that I can just pass in now HTML components in here and start writing just bare HTML and pass it into the web view. So, like just boom, boom, boom. Yeah, I'm not good at it. I'm not going to write HTML in front of you. Don't make me do it. But I think if I just do this and put in some text, it should show you. Oh wait, this is the. So if you use three quotes in Swift, it literally takes everything. It's a string literal. So what it's complaining about is some new lines. It just wants everything on the same thing. So now when I do this and scroll down, oh geez, you can barely see it. Unformatted HTML. So there you go. If I put in an H1 tag, you probably see it better. Just really quickly touching on this configure method. Pull it down. Alright, one second. I'm going to actually open up. It's not open up the whole function because I'm using it as a package, and then it kind of gives me just the overall look of it. So really quickly, I'll just open up the project and actually show you what it is. So there's quite a bit of functions in here, but what we're really going to focus on is not the containers, it's really just the extensions. So in this NS object protocol is what I was talking about. It is dumb simple, but it's the fact that most any object or most any class in UIKit in Swift goes back to NS object protocol. So pretty much any UIKit object will refer to this. I don't know if string will or those basic kind of ones, but I have a simple configure method, and it takes a closure that passes in self. Now self is a little unique. I have found it kind of difficult to get the same functionality in other languages, so If you do know a language that can handle this, I've tried to mess with it in C#. But what I mean by self is the type of any object passed into this. So it's not this. This is very different. This just doesn't make any sense to write. But the fact that Swift lets me automatically infer the type of the object being passed in, I can get the actual type of it. So if I pass in a UI image, if I do UI image.configure, I could do all the imperative code that I showed you for that button, set the title, set the color, add the action. I can do all that in this configure. And then it will return self at the end. So it actually returns the object. Another thing that I kind of hammered a ton is this embed function. So embed does what I said it does. It turns off Tamic, adds the view, and does that boilerplate kind of code that I was talking about to set up the padding around it. The last bit I'd like to touch on is just the H stack, horizontal stack, and vertical stack. It's just this kind of nice function that takes in a closure of an array of views, so it could be 100 views. It doesn't have to be a limited number of views like SwiftUI. And then it will add all those views. It takes optional views, so you can also send it something optional in case that you have it. But then yeah, it just passes all the values that you give it in the constructor into the stack view, and then adds the view. So those are the main two that I really attribute this framework to starting is, hey, I want to embed a view, or hey, I want a stack view. After that, everything else fell into place, and it kind of just went from there. So I guess that's mainly all of the talk. Is there any questions specifically?
So your main, you should call methods in your package are the vertical stack, horizontal stack, configure, and embed.
Yeah. Yeah.
Those are all four.
Yeah,
How do you order
those
them?
are like the main that
Those are
drove
the
it.
main.
Yeah, if
And
I couldn't
everything
get
else,
those.
everything else supports those.
Yeah, everything else is just nicety. Yeah, so pretty much a label just has these modifiers that I can just chain them onto each other. But really, yeah, no, I mean, there's no like complex code other than those four. Yes.
So those four, if somebody were developing with your SwiftUIKit, those are the key four things that they must do.
Yeah.
And everything else, is everything else basically parallel with because I see you have labels and stuff like that. Are all those names basically objects? Are they inherited from another package in Swift, or are you? If I were going to do development without your package, I would still use the label class, but you maybe extended the label class if I'm using the proper term
Yeah.
for your use.
Yeah, so pretty much any view that I have inside of here just drops UI. So all these views are extended from UI.
From UI.
Yeah,
Okay.
and so they are UIKit components.
Okay.
And then, yes, if there's anything I find that I add a lot, like I guess button is a great example of, I always add a title to button. Sometimes I add an image or whatever, but I have text color, background color, what kind of event, and then that stuff. And that just links all these up. So there's no like logic or anything. It's like, give me a value, I'll put it in for you.
So you just kind of did all that boilerplate code, as you call it.
Yeah.
And did all that for the different views or components.
Yeah, exactly. So if I don't have something that you don't like, you can do it the imperative way by saving a reference, or you can use configure and then just change the values inside of that.
So configure lets you take, say, another component that you might not have listed and configure it as if you were using one of the components you created.
Yeah, I can show you an example really quick. I think that's a great point. So for this demo app, super quick, if I so I'm trying to think of a view that I don't use, where I haven't like implemented some view. UI collection view. I guess that
Okay.
would maybe be a good start. So you could create it. That's fine, but I have this collection view. Now I have to do the classic sum view dot add all these things.
For all
So
the
the
different
only thing configure does is I can do the exact same thing that I just almost did, but I can do that.
It's kind of like with in Visual Basic.
Yes.
With
Yeah.
do these things. Now, forgive me for asking this question, but for all of the objects that you customize, like the button or standard objects, right? Could you have done that with your configure, and done that and kind of maybe made a library for supporting all those objects that you have that are already done, that you've done with the imperative description? Could you have done that with configure, and then it would have been basically the same thing, just different syntax?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You hit it on the head right there. So I tried to at some point use what I've made. So you can see inside my library, I use embed quite
Okay.
frequently because I don't want to write that boilerplate of every time I use embed, I have to write, these all that every single time. So I guess configure I don't, and that's
It just shows
it's
that
pretty
you
much
like-
one-to-one, like
Okay.
you said.
Now,
it's
is
pretty
it
parallel.
is it less computationally efficient if you would you have to use configure for that?
No,
No.
I would assume configured to be microscopically less microscopic. I don't know. That's not
It just would, it's a major.
yeah, since you have to create a reference to a closure and use a function, then that's just a little bit more address references and
Okay.
memory. Other than that, it's just you have the object and I'm telling the object what to change.
Oh.
So yeah, it's very small, but I could use configure
Could
to
use configure.
edit these. Pretty much for that, I would love that you bring this up. So I can type in configure, and now I can just do $0 background color equals background color, and
You could have put configure in.
yeah. Yeah, so at some point it might be cleaner to understand and that stuff, but at the point that I was writing this, I didn't understand or didn't think there was a major benefit to do that, other than kind of confusion. If someone did look, they're like, okay, I understand what these are, but what is configured,
Configured.
and kind of the layers on it. So that's why I only stuck with embed. And you can see closure, and then I chain dot padding, and then dot gesture. So I can chain these things. Any other questions?
Just looking at how you do your set title color. So this is the set title color is part of your library. It's part of the we're looking at right now, right? So like, is there a reason you chose to do blue rather than like tint color or something like that? Or like because the default color of a title is tint color, right?
So
Like I'm an NIM.
I'm gonna tell you straight out, I still don't understand fully what tint color does.
Okay.
Michael, do you understand what tint color does?
Oh, I'm sorry.
So, yeah, just throwing you in this. So self dot tint color. Well, I guess we could read it. What is tint color for a button? Do you know?
It will tint the label. What does that mean?
I think my understanding of tint color is like theming with iOS. So like you could define a tint color and an appearance. Like the appearance. I think it's called appearance in iOS. Like where you define themes in kind of way. I haven't done it in a long time, but like so if you define a theme with appearance, I could change. I think the default is blue. And then if you wanted to change it to like bring all the text colors to be pink or something like that, you could change your tint color in your text like attributes or whatever, and then it would automatically theme your whole app. That's how not when you're using storyboards, but when you're using like UI and code, it'd be like so like I just think that might be a better default than blue, because essentially what you're doing is you're forcing to either use blue or pass in a color, right?
Yes. Yeah, so that's kind of the caveat of I guess it's already blue, so I just changed it. It was actually default white for a bit, so that didn't really help me have white backgrounds. I don't see a button. But no, I think that's a great point. If I do and then there's I don't like set title color. That's a really weird difference, and I think that's another topic for other things because I just changed that switch, you know, the UI switch, and then I used tint color and that didn't change. So I don't know. I'll look into it. I think that's a great point though. I haven't thought about adding appearance in.
Well, yeah, I think I don't know how many people actually who do iOS who actually use